So the umbrella revolution. It is called the umbrella revolution because during the protest, the protesters used umbrellas to protect themselves from tear gas and pepper spray. So the story is that China promised Hong Kong in 2007 they will get to elect their own chief executive for 2017. However, last year in summer, Beijing backpedaled and said that they have to scan the candidate first before the Hong Kong citizens actually get to vote. So then from September last year, students start to hit the streets to protest for full democracy. So what is the media saying about the relationship between China and Hong Kong, and how do they talk about this story?
When I saw those scenes, I saw all these citizens with their fragile umbrella fighting against all these armed to the bones policemen with their large size pepper gas spray. So it's like a weak person fighting against this machine. So I was very touched, and the policeman ripped their umbrella away and tried to spray into the protesters' face, and that is unacceptable.
A lot of the protesters here are fearing the worst because as their numbers go up, they're worried that Beijing's patience is going to run out and Beijing is going to issue an order to the Beijing appointed leader of Hong Kong to crack down. So some people are bracing themselves, and they say, interestingly enough, that even if there's more tear gas and more pepper spray, they'll still stay nonviolent and they'll push the police and appeal to their humanity and try to attain their reforms that they're looking for without fighting back.
So tear gas, pepper spray, and thanks for the media, we can also see this and this. All I can see is that the police, which symbolize the central Chinese government, is playing the bad guy. And they're acting violently against those vulnerable and polite protesters who just want their full democracy, which is showing that Chinese government totally overpowers Hong Kong. So now let's see how Chinese media responds to it.
Since we're apparently now living in bizarro world, you know what? There were no protests in Hong Kong over the weekend. They were just celebrating National Day. That is, when they weren't supporting the general election plan. This was from Shanghai's state-controlled Dragon TV, which handled the Occupy Central protests by airing a story about a completely different pro-Beijing protest instead.
As millions tweet and post their support for hashtag Occupy Central, those messages won't be seen in China. There's no Facebook or Twitter there, and now Beijing has reportedly blocked Instagram.
So how the Chinese media talk about it is that they don't talk about it. However, the Western media tells me about this, which implies that although China overpowers Hong Kong, the protest still worries them, and they're afraid that it will influence and spread to other parts of China. Now let's go to an expert and listen to her opinion.
Generally the relationship between China and Hong Kong.
So typically what the American media is doing is certainly seeing it in the context of a number of different pro-democracy protests. I would say probably lump them together in certain ways and seeing them under the umbrella, if you will, of pro-democracy. I'd say probably in the American media there's not a lot of nuance in what is happening specifically between the relationship between China, Hong Kong, historical pasts. Certainly precedents like Tiananmen Square are brought up because the American media tends to use those as big examples of we want to be like America. So you don't get the full history of the region from the news, because there's reasons behind.
Then, thanks to social media, the world saw this, Umbrella Man. And people remembered this, Tank Man. That image from 25 years ago in Tiananmen Square became an iconic symbol of the fight for freedom in China. The unrest in 1989 led to fierce battles in the streets, and the military killed an estimated 1,000 people.
Just like what Dr. Maxon said, Tiananmen Square massacre and this protest are compared a lot to imply what the Chinese government might do to the protesters this time. However, we need to remember that it happened 25 years ago, and everything is different in China now. Now let's hear about what some other news are saying.
Despite being nominally ruled by totalitarian China, Hong Kong is no stranger to public demonstration. The current unrest was preceded by weeks of student protests and planned rallies demanding China loosen its grip on Hong Kong's elections. And public outcry has even managed to affect social change in the past. 2 years ago, a proposed pro-communist education plan was withdrawn after student protesters occupied Hong Kong's government headquarters. A win for the protests could fundamentally change the relationship between China and Hong Kong.
So it brings up the education reform 2 years ago, which was led by the current unloved chief executive Liu Chang-in. He is believed to be and called the communist puppet. So 2 years ago, the protest worked and the reform got cancelled. So is the media suggesting that the protest this time might also make an impact? So as you can see, in general, all the Western medias are standing by Hong Kong side, and they all send us the same message. They also use past events to predict what's gonna happen and suggest that although the totalitarian Communist Party overpowers Hong Kong right now, this revolution could possibly change the relationship between Hong Kong and China. Thanks for watching!